Hey, you're listening to the Riverdale podcast. This is episode number 106. My name is Jonathan. Welcome to lovely Riverdale, USA. This is a weekly Archie Comics fan podcast. We update every Saturday morning, and every week we break things down into 4 categories. The first category is the book of the week. That's the comic book I read this week. Sometimes it's a new comic book, sometimes it's an old comic book, but it's always an Archie comic book. We move then to the news of the week. That's what happened in the world of Archie in the week since our last podcast. Then on to new releases. That's what came out this past Wednesday, what will be coming up this coming Wednesday from Archie. And I'm super excited to announce that the final portion of the show this week will be talking to Dean Haspiel. Awesome. I'm super, super excited to get to that. Dean, of course, has been working on the Fox for Archie, the 5th issue of which came out this week. We're going to talk about that a little bit at the end of the show, and then talk to Dean. That's going to be rad. I want to thank everyone who has signed up to be a Riverdale resident in the last week. Super exciting. As you may or may not know, you can sign up at the website, riverdalepodcast.com. Over on the left-hand side, there's a little drop box, and you can decide on a small amount of money to contribute to the show once a month. That helps keep the show moving, helps me be excited and monetarily gifted to keep the show rolling, and it's going to put you in the running for giveaways that we're going to do every month. I'm also cooking up some video content to get out to the folks who sign up to be Riverdale residents. So it's going to be beneficial to you, beneficial to me. Give that a thought. But without further ado, let's get on to the show. Let's get into the book of the week. This week's book of the week is Archie, number 653. This is the final part of the World Tour storyline. This finds all the Riverdale kids landing in Canada, of all places. I believe this was originally the issue that was going to take place in Russia before the awful human rights stuff went down over the last summer. Or maybe the fall. I guess it doesn't matter. The point is, Archie Comics made a very reasonable decision to not bring the kids within the storyline to Russia. So they are in Canada this issue. As I said, this is the fourth part of the 4-part Rockin' Around the World storyline, written and drawn by Dan Parent with inks by Rich Kozlowski, letters by Jack Morelli, and colors by Digicore Studios. What I've liked about this series and what I've disliked about this series, I guess we'll do one and then the other. The thing that I haven't liked as much is it has been pretty light on story, on depth, but it has more than made up for that in sort of speed. There's a quickness to it. There's a lightness to it, and there is just innumerable characters in here. Lots of folks that we're excited to see who I haven't seen in a long time. Katie Keene makes an appearance. Sabrina makes an appearance. Of course, we've got all of the bands. That's Bingo Wilkins' band, the Bingos. We've got the Madhouse Glads from back in the day in Madhouse Comics. And, of course, the Archies and Josie and the Pussycats. I do think it's a really difficult balance to strike when you're doing sort of a little bit of fan service in bringing in all these characters that we've wanted to see, and then having sort of a limited 4-issue arc in which to tell these stories. But it is effective nonetheless. We get a great moment with Alexandria and Cheryl Blossom. I like that team up. I don't know whether that's been done before or why it hasn't been done before, but it works out really, really well. That's to Dan Parent's credit for bringing those folks together. And we further the Valerie and Archie relationship a little bit. They sort of are really driven back together throughout these 4 issues. only to be pulled apart again at the end of the tour when Archie needs to go back to Riverdale and Valerie needs to continue the Josie and the Pussycats tour. And then things switch up at the very end, spoiler alert, when Amisha, the Indian pop singer who we met in the first part of this storyline back in Archie 650, moves to Riverdale. She's now a citizen of Riverdale, USA. And hopefully this is touched upon. I don't know whether this is going to tie in at all to the Betty and Veronica storyline that's coming up where they leave town. I believe that was written quite a while ago, so I'm not sure if that's going to line up or not. I would love if that were the case. It's always nice to have a big surprise and a big status quo sort of switch up at the end of a storyline like this. So it's great to have Amisha, come into Riverdale. I just hope that they further that story and we do see her down the line. It's pretty common for folks to be introduced who we either don't see again or don't see frequently enough. Obviously, that was the case with the whole New Kids storyline from a few years ago. They brought in a lot of those characters, and we haven't seen much of them since. But sort of in review, on the whole, I think that the World Tour storyline has been a big success. It's great to get the Bingos back in the public eye. I love Bingo Wilkin. I love seeing Katie Keene. And what has almost become frustrating with the storyline is that you want to see these folks all the time. You want Archie to have like a wide enough, publishing line that you can get all these characters all the time. So maybe this series was a bit of a tease in that way. That like, oh, there's that character I love, and there's that other character I love, and I used to read their adventures, and I don't see them as much anymore. So in that regard, hats off to Dan Parent. This was a super fun series. Great to see the Archie and Valerie relationship explored more. But that is our book of the week. Archie, number 653. In Archie news this week, it was announced back on Monday over at Comic Book Resources that last week's book of the week, Afterlife with Archie number 4, has sold out at the distributor level, is going to get a second printing. I feel like I have announced this news many, many times because this makes the 4th consecutive issue that has gone to a second printing. And that is exciting, not just because the book is selling and being successful in that way. It means that we get another fantastic Francesco Francavilla cover for it. And this one is a beauty. It might be my favorite cover so far. It is a beautiful headshot of Vegas, Archie's dog. And if you've read Afterlife with Archie number 4, you know that Vegas plays a very important role in the book. But that's great news. Second printing for Afterlife with Archie number 4. Archie unveiled this week Jughead's Hunger Attack game. This is just a web-based game. It's over on the Archie website. It's a little bit like Pac-Man. It's actually a lot like Pac-Man. You are Jughead, and you're scurrying around the Riverdale High School cafeteria, eating slices of pizza and cheeseburgers and whatnot, while Miss Beasley and some other cafeteria workers are roaming around trying to dissuade you from doing so. It is stupid fun. It should not be half as fun as I found it. But that's rad. Came across that this week. Finally this week, over at Comics Alliance, Chris Sims, who we just talked to on the last episode about the goings-on in Archie Comics. A lot of positive response from him being part of the show. He has an Ask Chris article that he does once a week. Folks send in by Twitter or email their questions. He was asked about the weirdest things that Archie Comics has done and compiled a very hefty list, a very extensive article about all of the weird stuff that has gone on from Archie Comics publications, or at least the majority of it. Fantastic article. That is going to do it for the news this week. to recap, Afterlife with Archie #4 gets a second printing. Jughead's Hunger Attack Game is fantastic. Chris Sims writing about Archie over on Comics Alliance. Head over to RiverdalePodcast.com. There you'll see the post for this episode. We'll have links to all of those stories. New releases for this past Wednesday, March the 12th. Of course, our book of the week, Archie #653 for $2.99. The Fox #5, which we'll be talking about momentarily. That came out this week with 5 variant covers. Fantastic covers. Mike Norton, Mike Cavallero, Howard Chaykin, Dean Haspiel, obviously, and one other one I am not thinking of, but keep an eye out. Oh, Alex Toth. There's an Alex Toth cover as well. A bunch of great stuff. Also this week, Sonic Universe #61 for $2.99. It's the third part of the Shadow Falls storyline. There are great 4 or 5 page previews of all of these over at RiverdalePodcast.com. Archie sent those out earlier this week. So if you want to check any of those out, Riverdale Podcast, you'll find those. Coming up next week, March the 19th, we're going to get Archie's Funhouse Double Digest #3 for $3.99. Those are churning out. We're getting those like one on top of each other. That's awesome. Also next week, Sonic the Hedgehog #258 for $2.99. I think we'll be talking about that next week. I might try to catch up with Sonic the Hedgehog. We'll see how that goes. Also next week, and finally next week, World of Archie Double Digest #38. This has shown up in a lot of the Diamonds lists as a $4.99 price point. I'm assuming that that's a misprint and it's actually a $3.99 book. It doesn't appear to be a double digest, which would put it at the $5.99 price point. I'm assuming that's a typo. We're going to get that for $3.99 next week. Finally, this week, on the digital side of things, over at digital.archiecomics.com, in the Archie Comics app, over at Comixology, wherever you get your digital comics, you'll find Archie and Friends Bromances. Bromances is one of my least favorite words, in case you were wondering. This is a book, a 100-page digital exclusive. This is all great reprints and stories about friendship, I assume. And that is 100 pages for $3.99. So those are your new releases for this past Wednesday, the 12th, this coming Wednesday, the 19th, and your digital releases of the week from Archie Comics. All right, this week, we got the 5th issue of The Fox that wraps up the 5-issue miniseries that has been created, envisioned, shepherded along by Dean Haspiel. This has been a really, really fun series. As I'm sure we'll talk about, the first issue we talked about back in October when that first came out. I was really, really psyched on that. And then there was sort of like a low period for me when I was reading it and I wasn't really catching on. I wasn't really grasping it. And with that 4th issue we talked about a few weeks back, that 4th issue, I totally locked in. I feel like I really, 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 really chatted that up, talked that up when that came out a few weeks ago. And this 5th issue this week really, really brought everything together. I was really, really excited with how this turned out. Everything from the design of the characters, the creators that he brought in to work on it, the actual mechanics of the story and how it came together, and the great super heroic nature of how everything wrapped up was all very successful and very out of the ordinary. It is not by any means a conventional book. It has a lot of attributes that other books on the shelves do not have. So I'm super, super excited to talk to Dean about all of this. So without further ado, Dean Haspiel, welcome to lovely Riverdale, USA.
Thanks for having me, Riverdale, USA.
Well, I wanted to start off maybe a bit of a dorky question, but The Fox
Sure.
is definitely a book that wears its influences on its sleeve. It's what I wrote down in my notes is that it's a classic book, but it's not a nostalgic book. It's not an ironic book.
Right.
Um, so, can you talk a little bit about your influences going into it?
Sure. I mean, that's a good way of putting it. Actually, I was talking to someone yesterday, and they were saying it was an optimistic book, and I thought
Mm.
that was also a good way of describing the series and the approach to the character, the Fox. Um, yeah. I mean, obviously, I mean, I'm going to be 47 in May, so a lot of the comics that I grew up on in the, let's just say, late 70s, and then 80s and beyond. Back then when you're started like comic books, you kind of go backwards. So the comic books I went backwards to from the 70s and 80s was obviously, the beginning of the Silver Age, i.e., the beginning of Marvel Comics, like 1961 Fantastic Four, and then 62 Spider-Man, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of my comics, or my sense for comics, were informed by those 1960s Silver Age comics. And then, of course, later on in life, most recently in the last decade, I've been going even further back to the Golden Age. And specifically with this series, The Fox, doing my homework, I had to go back and see the origins of this character. And he was created in 1940, the Golden Age, as were a lot of those Red Circle characters. And, the first time I became aware of The Fox was when Alex Toth wrote and drew two stories of his in the mid 1980s in the back of a Black Hood comic. And I was so enthralled and raptured by those two stories and the way he looked and his candor and everything about it that I never forgot uh, the having that experience. So it was sheer luck, I think, or the cosmos aligning or something, that I'd be given the opportunity to work on the Fox, because he's always a character that just is inspiring. Again, especially because of how Alex Toth did him. So when I was given the opportunity to pitch the story, there was no way I was going to do it like Alex Toth, because I would fail miserably. And the way Alex Toth's approach was more pulpy, kind of crime noir, set back in the day, like I believe in the 1940s or 50s. So we weren't going to do that anyway. But I also knew there was no way I was going to tell a crime story. And for those who have a cursory understanding of the Fox, that is kind of the approach you might start off with, because Paul Patton Jr., the son of the original Fox, who is now carries the mantle of the Fox, has no superpowers. So I'm writing and drawing a story about a superhero with no superpowers. So you would yield or lean towards kind of telling crime stories. But I decided to throw a wrench into that and tell a very pulpy story by surrounding him in really extraordinary situations. He gets basically taken off planet at the end of the second issue to another realm. He's surrounded by monsters and fire golems and queens of diamonds and trapped kings and that kind of stuff. Hold on a second. My two cats are fighting here in my house.
Sure.
Stop it. um, and stuff like that. So I want to do something that was a little surreal. Psychedelic was definitely a word I used in my pitch, and I feel like that was something I wanted to draw. And counting my lucky stars, I was excited to get Alan Pasalacqua to color the book. And if you've seen the
Mm.
book, it's as you can tell, it's quite psychedelic, and we worked very hard together to get that look. But yeah, I mean, I basically wanted to throw a guy into a situation that was insane, and meanwhile, he's a reluctant superhero because he doesn't want to be a superhero anymore. He craves the domestic life. He wants to be boring because everything around him is so crazy. So it's kind of like the opposite of someone who like sits at home all day and wants to do something, or go outside and do something nutty. He wants the opposite of that. He wants to hang out with his wife. He wants to cook dinner for her. He wants to go for long walks in the park, and he doesn't get to do that.
Yeah, something that struck me immediately about this book is just how out of the ordinary It is. And what a strange book it is, if you don't mind the term.
Well, and it should be, and that's how you should feel. It should feel strange. You used the term classic. One of the other things I wanted to do, and thank God I was able to work with Mark Waid and James DeMatteis,
Hmm.
and actually Terry Austin inking Mike Cavallaro in the Shield backup feature. One of the greatest inkers of forever.
Agreed.
And John Workman, who lettered Thor over Walt Simonson and all these other great comics. I wanted to have that feel and that look of the kinds of comics that I read as a kid, but in today's terms. And I've said this before, and I don't mean to, get a little preachy here,
Hmm.
but a lot of today's comic books have become quite bleak. I think the trend, well, it started with these really cool commentary comic books like Watchmen, like Dark Knight Returns.
Yep.
But to me, those were more commentary on our society, not necessarily on our superheroes. And now our superheroes have become so dark and bleak. And every time they sell a new story, I think I just read in the news today or one of the comic book websites, there's a new Wolverine arc coming out called like 3 Months to Live. It's all about dying. Everyone is dying. And then they resurrect and then they die. Rinse, repeat. It's getting quite boring, honestly. I mean, I do feel like I've put some of the characters in the Fox series into precarious situations, and maybe there's a threat of death, but it's never like they died or, as the reader, especially the way it's drawn, the way it looks, the candor of the story, you know that they're going to find a way out of it, and that's okay. The journey is to figure out how to get out of situations, and why does one become a hero, or why does someone not want to be a hero? I can understand that. It's hard to do this. You get beat up, you get your ass handed to you. It's a difficult thing to be, and that was some of the stuff I wanted to address.
So was all of that in the original pitch? That's one thing.
Yes, the sense of that was in the original pitch, and then having talks with Mark over the phone after I would basically lay it out, draw it. He'd get to see the artwork. He understood the story, or else he wouldn't have signed up.
Yep.
But then he would get to it once the artwork was provided, and then we'd have another conversation. And we would talk about the tone of the story, because all the agendas and the beats were there. It was more like, how do we knit this together with a voice? And he brought such a great voice to the Fox, and he did such a great job of kind of taking my craziness and kind of making sense of it, so that was somewhat plausible. Even though, again, it's a superhero comic, so crazy things happen.
Yep.
But that all that stuff. I mean, and that's why that like inner monologue is in this comic book, because he's dealing with these different issues of domesticity versus superheroics.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about the structure of the series, because that's what really fascinated me reading it. And I read it as the issues came out, and then again I read it this morning in preparation to talking to you for the first time, back to back to back.
I haven't even done that myself. I should try that.
And I talked about this when we hit the fourth issue. I talked about it on the podcast. Is that when that great backup story and then the main story sort of collide?
Yes.
That was really a point where the series really gelled for me, and I really started to see exactly what it is that you guys were doing. So it's an odd structure for a series. Was that the plan from the beginning? How did that come about?
All right, let's reverse engineer this.
Okay, maybe that's a lot of questions at once.
No, it's cool because I know exactly what you mean, and hopefully it was a nice surprise, because you get a backup feature in a comic and you usually think, oh, that's just a second little story to either help pad the comic, or we're using another character to keep the IP going, whatever, right? But I knew at the very beginning when I pitched this that I wanted a backup feature that would seem like it was extra, but actually it became essential by the fifth issue.
Well, mission accomplished.
Thank you. And so we cast that comic book very differently, or the backup feature, The Shield, very differently, so you wouldn't notice what was about to happen when it happened. That was something that I had pitched, frankly, because when I came up with my initial Freak Magnet story, it really was about 4 issues, maybe even 3 issues. The second issue was the way I pitched the series to begin, but luckily my editor Paul Kaminsky had the wisdom to understand, whoa, 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 we're going 100 miles an hour with that story.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we rein it back in and go about 35 miles an hour and then catch up to speed? So then I created the story that ran in the first issue, which involved Madam Satan. And then it kind of sets the tone of how these crazy things start to happen to him. Not only does a crazy thing happen to him, well, first of all, we had to reintroduce the character back into Impact City, into the Red Circle universe.
Yep.
He's just come back from Japan with his wife, and he has a son now. He has an estranged daughter. He's about to start his first day back at a job being a photojournalist. And on that first day in the job, this crazy stuff happens with Madam Satan and social networking and all this fun little commentary we got to make with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the last page, you're like, whoa, he's suddenly being like solicited by some other, an alien woman. And then and actually the backup feature in the first issue, which is a Fox story, was basically my audition. I had done this 6-page Fox story that was a little off kilter and wonky. And that's what convinced editor Paul Kaminsky and the Red Circle gang to decide to do a 5-issue miniseries, which was great. I mean, I was not expecting that to happen. So then we put that in the backup feature to also give a little sense of the way I was going to do this character. And then we go off into the story I originally pitched. But also in my pitch, I wanted to have a backup feature that collided with the lead story and then flip the script again by the 5th issue. And I actually feel that the 5th issue feels like a whole other comic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite epic. For 24 pages, you get a lot in that story. And in fact, I did a little tricky thing that I had not originally intended, was if you see the guy who plays Hachiman
mm-hmm.
from the S.H.I.E.L.D. story, and they're sitting in the bar at the end there,
yep.
In their civilian clothes, I decided to draw Hachiman the same way as I drew the Japanese camera salesman from the backup feature in the first issue.
Oh.
So I was kind of seeding that as well. Like, like in the Fox's life, he can't help but run into these people no matter what.
It's fantastic.
And again, those are just like little Easter eggs. If you don't see them at first, they don't matter. They're just fun, extra little bits of information, It was someone else that pointed out, and this was something that I'm not going to get into on the podcast here because I haven't fully developed the idea,
mm-hmm.
but I was seeding other things in there. I basically out Inferno as being gay
yep.
in a little moment with the Marvel.
I noticed that on my second reading of it today.
Sweet. So, yeah, I mean, I do want to do more stuff with not only the Fox, but with more of these characters. So I am planting little ideas, and they can go somewhere or not, depending on where you take the story.
Can we talk about, you mentioned Alan Pasalacqua as the colorist. Was it you who pulled the team together? Was that Paul Kaminsky, or did you guys work together? Because
that was all me. That was all me. Thankfully,
it's a real like murderer's row.
Well, I had a vision. Honestly, I had a vision. After that 6-page story I did, and then Paul invited me to submit a pitch and come up with an idea. You start to envision things, and he trusted me, Paul, and that was fantastic. And obviously, you're not going to say no to a Mark Waid or J.M. DeMatteis. He was not as familiar with Mike Cavallaro, but once looking at his art and seeing the collaborations that Mike had done with JMD on The Life and Times of Savior 28, it was a no-brainer to have those guys work together again. And then Mike also worked with a colorist named Andy Kovalt. Mm-hmm. And then I had my guy, Alan, who I'd worked with previously. And honestly, he's not just a colorist. He's my right-hand man. My page is not done. If it's a color book, my page is not done unless he's put his hands on it. That's how I feel these days, because of how much he really does contribute to my art. And then, of course, John Workman, one of the best letterers in the industry. Just to see his style and his arrangement, he really makes the page sing, especially with JMD's dialogue, because we all know JMD likes to write.
Yes.
So, but yeah, and then Terry Austin, are you kidding me? That was like the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
So, in fact, I believe Terry was a Paul Kaminsky contribution, because I think Terry had been working on other Archie comics, or I don't exactly know. Was it Sonic the Hedgehog? Something he was in, maybe Mega Man. I don't remember.
Yeah, Terry was inking some of the action books. I think if I'm not misremembering, he inked the Jinx books, the Little Jinx
Oh,
grown
all
up
right,
books.
cool. Cool. And Cavallero just wanted to pencil this book, and because he was juggling the Shield and doing a 4-issue Mega Man series at the same time.
Yep.
So then he knew that he didn't have time to ink it, and he's a great inker himself anyway. But having said that, we needed an inker, and it was Paul who brought Terry into the fold, and of course John Workman as well, because John also works on a lot of those books. So yeah, I mean, we had a lot of vision for this, and oftentimes when you have an initial idea, you hope for the best. Well, this came out better than I ever could have imagined.
It and it I feel, as you said, it ended differently than it began. And I mean,
Did
I
that
guess
work for you? Did that work for you? That issues 4 to 5 transition.
oh, it worked definitely. I felt like honestly with issue 3, I was a little bit like, where is this going? We're in this weird place. We're meeting these characters, and 4 just like I said, it just gelled, like it all locked in together. How much were you seeding to tie it into like the New Crusaders book that came before, or I don't know if you know anything about New Crusader stuff coming up? Was there any of that stuff to sort of
Right.
coalesce?
We yes, we had talked about well, the connection between the Fox and the New Crusaders is Fly Girl, his estranged daughter.
Yes.
And we threw that in there to make the connection, and the fact that he's nervous and anxious about kind of making amends for having split Dodge and gone to Japan and basically getting married and having another child.
Mm-hmm.
So we threw that in there. And whether or not we address that further in the Fox Hunt remains to be seen, because of how we're putting together right now and what that's going to mean. I did pitch one idea that involved it heavily, and it may not as much now. But we also, of course, we're going to use the Shield, who has, is older now. But I guess I don't know if his aging is slowed down or not. I don't know the full extent of his prowess.
He's super powered.
He's just super powered. He's getting older, but he's, because we draw him with the beard, and he's basically mentoring the New Crusaders to a certain level. So I was very aware of the New Crusaders. I'd read the series. I enjoyed it very much. And so, like, how much were we going to connect that? We knew we were just going to lightly connect it in this series. And in the next one, it'll still kind of hover around it somewhat. But I'm letting the Red Circle, well, I'm not letting them do anything, but they are, in fact, what they're going to do with the New Crusaders in their own way. And I don't really know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they have plans to kind of like take their Red Circle superheroes a little more seriously. And the Fox Hunt will be a part of that plan. So again, that's something that you'd have to ask the editors, because the little that I know, I can't really speak on, because those things change anyway. And if I'm going to be starting to draw Fox Hunt in, like, let's say mid-April, we're not looking at the first issue to come out until, I don't know. I mean, again, there's no official release date, but let's just say October-ish,
Yep. Well, there's definitely exciting stuff coming with Alex Segura coming back in, and the editor position with the Red Circle stuff. But let's talk about the Fox Hunt that was announced with this final issue 5, just came out this week. What can you tell us? I mean, what can we expect from the series? Are we going to see Impact City?
Oh, okay. We're going to see a little bit. Yes, we're definitely going to see Impact City. How do I put this without giving anything away?
Yeah, don't give anything away.
Yeah, obviously the word hunt is very important.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you can play this game with yourself, but there's a character in Freak Magnet that is going to play a major role in the Fox Hunt that you see briefly in Freak Magnet. That's going to play a major role. In fact, I'm going to try and revisit a couple other characters, but it's going to be the only way I can describe if I was able to envision Freak Magnet for the way it came out now, I can only say that Fox Hunt is going to kick Freak Magnet's butt.
Awesome.
Let's put it that way. And the really cool, interesting thing that's going to be something of a challenge at first, just because I'm trying to wrap my head around it, is that the Red Circle guys asked me to draw Fox Hunt in the more indie style that I employ for my Billy Dogma comics and stuff like that.
Awesome.
So it's going to look very differently. Like this series had more of a kind of analog, animated kind of style, with bright colors and whatnot. And again, we're not going to go bleak because, I'll save bleak for my horror stuff, or whatever. But it's going to look a little grittier, a little more indie, a little more, honestly, more of me, if that makes any sense.
That's awesome.
So thanks. Thank you.
That's exciting. I love, obviously I wouldn't do this podcast if I wasn't excited about what Archie was doing editorially and the decisions that they're making. But it sounds like they've given you a great opportunity here. They've given you, the freedom to run with the story that you wanted to tell.
Well, yeah, they've given me a nice long leash, let's put it, right? Because obviously it's their characters, and I'm just the custodian right now of the Fox for a little while. We'll see how long that lasts.
Mm-hmm.
What was exciting is that when I first approached the Fox, no one at Red Circle really knew what to do with him. So I had an even longer leash because, hell, let's just try something here and have fun, right? And hope for the best. And now that the 5 issues have come out, we've gotten some, nice critical acclaim and a lot of good notes. Now people can look at that and go, okay, maybe we should go a little bit more in this direction. So that's when editorial oversight starts to come in a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of being a professional cartoonist, is being able to serve the character as per your boss's wishes, but also inserting your own, sensibilities into that so that, you meet each other halfway in the middle and take it from there, what's crazy is I assume you've seen these Fox trailers that Vine was making.
Yep.
They look like cartoons almost.
And they're amazing.
I'm like, go make a Fox cartoon for crap's sake. It's right there in front of you. Like there's your beta test. It's kind of amazing that they're able to take flat images from a comic book and turn it into what they do. And gosh, I wish somebody would just go make an actual 10-minute cartoon. I just got a DVD collection of Thundar the Barbarian recently.
If you're talking about Alex Toth, bringing the conversation
all
the way
Toth,
around.
Jack Kirby, Steve Gerber. That is exactly kind of like I know that I watched that as a kid in the 1980s when it came out, so it must have ingrained itself into the back of my brain, just like seeing Alex Toth's The Fox. So I kind of made that matchup recently that's kind of what I was doing. I was kind of doing like this Indiana Jones, Thundar the Barbarian, and then throw a little Daft Punk into it. And that's kind of the sensibilities I was going for here.
Well, the 5th issue is out now.
Yes.
I read the whole thing today. It even if even if you haven't read it all back to back, let me tell you, it reads really well. It's really smooth. We got a trade coming out next month, the second week of April, I think.
Is it April or May? For some reason, I've seen it marked for May, but maybe it's kind of, that'd be fantastic if it came out in April.
But it's coming up soon, in any event, and
cool.
We'll keep the listeners informed about when that's coming out. If you didn't catch up with the issues and you didn't catch up with it digitally, you'll definitely want to get the trade when that comes out. Dean Haspiel, thanks so much for being on the show.
Hey, thank you, Jonathan, and again, thanks for your cheer and support, and thanks for inviting me to Riverdale.
Awesome, thanks so much. That's Dean Haspiel on the Riverdale podcast. I want to thank Dean very much for taking some time out to be on the show this week, talk about the Fox. Fantastic. You can thank Dean for being on the show, and please do so by going out and getting those issues of the Fox, or going to your local comic shop and pre-ordering that trade coming out in the next month or so. As Dean said, he and Mark are working on a follow-up to that, but nothing is set in stone. The bigger the sales on the Fox, the better the chances are, that we're going to get more of it down the road. On the way out today, I want to remind everyone to head over to RiverdalePodcast.com. There you're going to see the cover of this week's Book of the Week, Archie 653, as well as Dean Haspiel's cover for the Fox number 5. You'll also get links to all of the news stories we talked about in the show today, as well as a link to deanhaspiel.com. Head over there and thank Dean for being a part of the show this week. You'll also find links over at riverdalePodcast.com to like us on Facebook, facebook.com/RiverdalePodcast, to follow us on Twitter at RiverdalePod. You'll also find our email address, riverdalePodcast@gmail.com. You can also call in and leave a voicemail. We'd love to get your thoughts on the last couple weeks' shows, the last couple weeks' guests. That is 573-427-2443. That's 5734-ARCHIE. Riverdale Podcast is part of firstcomicsnews.com. Head over to First Comics News for your latest comics news, podcast reviews, lots of good stuff there, and new episodes of the Riverdale Podcast premiering there on Monday mornings. I think that's going to do it for this week. Thank you all very, very much for listening. Again, my name is Jonathan, and I'll see you again next week here in lovely Riverdale, USA.